So, like, sometimes a story has a villain. Like, you got your protagonist, and, like, you got the conflict, which goes against them, which is the antagonist. And then sometimes that antagonist takes the form of a person standing in direct opposition to your protagonist, which is a villain. Think of all the stories you know that have a villain or villain characters. Now, I want you to do something. Imagine all the ones that stand out in your mind, like the ones that you think are good or exceptional examples. Think of why they stand out, why you remember them. Think about all of the villain characters that you really liked, or you thought were cool, or maybe you wanted to draw them or create stories about them or create fan fictions about them. The ones you still think about today from stories or movies or games you've played. How many of those villains were memorable in a way that makes them more interesting than the protagonists that they were against? Now I want you to consider why you liked those villains so much. Because we're about to go over some reasons why you might be drawn to the villain in a given story more than the hero. Like, what traits make a villain the star of the show? And more importantly, I want to ask the question, when does a villain become the reason you're watching?
The world's a fucking slaughterhouse.
The first thing I want to do if we're going to have this conversation is I want to lay out requirements for a compelling villain. What does a villain need to have in order to be the type of villain that you're going to remember? What type of character traits, personality, or story beats do they need to have in order for you to consider them more important to you for the show? What does a villain need to have in order for the audience to love them? Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones is what we might consider a more relatable villain. Not the incest stuff, but, well, you'll see what I mean. Just like most of her family, she's just trying to live up to her father, but always ends up in his shadow, constantly put down for the sheer fact that she's a female, which a lot of people in the real world can relate to. So after a while, you kind of do root for her. Another thing is that she just wants to protect her children and be able to have a family, but she fails over and over again, caused by extenuating circumstances. So this makes her relatable. A lot of the events that are catalysts for her actions, the types of motivations that she has, are things that most of us might be able to relate to, or maybe a lot of people can relate to. Like, obviously I'm not a woman, I can't relate to that part of it, but a lot of people can relate to the structure of a society and a family that holds you down for something you can't control like that. So that's something relatable. Her motives are something we can relate to. So I think relating to a villain is probably the core tenet of what makes one compelling. If you can see a villain who's supposed to be the bad guy as someone that you understand and empathize with, then their story is going to be something you latch onto more in whatever the product is, especially if the hero isn't very relatable comparatively. So for someone like Cersei, how does the rest of her character interact with the way that we would relate to her? She was almost always unnecessarily cruel, which you may not relate to. After the death of her child and father, she grew paranoid and hysterical, making her even more dangerous. Like most characters in the show, she was only doing things that were in her best interest to gain more power. Her actions are in service of the core motivations that we relate to, though. So we see her doing things we don't think we'd ever do, but the reasons she's doing them are things we do relate to, we do think we would understand. It's like seeing a corrupted version of yourself, a version blinded by the same struggles and desires that you may have, but to the point of monstrosity, which is a pretty compelling story to tell. It could have you reflect on yourself, make you think, could I do those horrible things if I was in the same situation as her? By giving Cersei pieces of her character and life that we can relate to, it makes our relationship with her and her plight and the things that she wants to do in the story a little bit more complicated, and that complication leads to us being interested in the character. You see, there's this point in the show where Cersei has had it up to here with all of her enemies, so she uses them against each other in order to round up Marjorie the Sparrow and all his goons into the church. Once they're all nice and held in there, she blows the whole thing to smithereens using wildfire, a special type of explosive that would leave little remains. Now that she was queen, she was going to use her power to smite those that would get in the way of her goals, even if it meant killing a couple hundred people. Would I kill people to protect my children? Would I blow up a government building as revenge if I couldn't protect my child? Those are some pretty scary questions to ask, which makes the relatability point a key element in writing a villain that demands your attention, one that's memorable for years after you watch it. Hold on. What about Hannibal, though? He's not relatable at all. My point doesn't work at all. Fuck! Okay. Let me try again. We're gonna do this again. I can definitely come up with a list of things that are required for a compelling villain. I could do this. Okay. So, we're gonna restart. Let's do this again. Rewind. So yes, Hannibal, yes. Okay, so in the show, seasons 1 and 2 specifically, which were written by Brian Fuller, are unique works inspired by the original books, but not ripped directly from them. So the Hannibal from the show, which is played by Mads Mikkelsen, is completely separate from the Hannibal in the books or the original movies. He's kind of his own thing. And yeah, he's completely unrelatable. He's kind of alien and enigmatic, but despite this, he's very likable, in a really strange way. Often we talk about likable villains or bad guys that you root for, but usually this refers to a character that you relate to, like I was saying before, or that you have sympathy for, or that their motivations you understand and really can empathize with. This just isn't the case for Hannibal. He is completely out of reach from the person watching as a character. He is foreign, both literally and in a kind of human, non-human sense. He's a bad person, manipulating everyone around him, murdering them, eating them, and feeding them to other people. By all means, we should not like him. We have no footholds to start liking him like we would with any other human. And yet, there's this moment in season 2 where a character who is obviously coded as shitty, that you shouldn't like, and that you would see as a bad guy, right? And Hannibal is in a scene with him. This new bad dude, he's rude and gross, and he collects people's tears in order to make martinis with them. He sucks, and you're supposed to hate him. He's gross, and the show is telling us constantly, hey bro, you should hate this guy. And then Hannibal is just there. Hannibal the cannibal is right next to him, probably thinking about how to cook his lungs, and instead of equating these two shitty monsters, the show says, this one's the bad guy. And it makes you think, hey Hannibal, come on, do your thing to the man, do your thing. The show's framing Hannibal here as the character you're supposed to be on the side of. That Hannibal is the good guy in this situation, even though he's the one who's already killed a shit ton of people. This is one interesting way to make a villain that is memorable, or to make a villain who is the star of the show. The show frames Hannibal as the character you're supposed to pay attention to. He's an enigma, but at the same time, we're given enough of his internal worldview to know that he doesn't like rude people like that guy. And when we see a rude person, we want him to enact the Hannibal-style justice that the show shows. We want this from the character who is ostensibly the villain of the show. When Hannibal does kill one of these rude characters, we cheer it on. It's satisfying because they got what's coming to them. And Hannibal, in this way, is our force against those, even though he is the villain. One of the ways to make a character likable in this way, another way to frame them as a character we should pay attention to and focus on in a story, is to show them at rest. There's this concept called antagonist at rest, which is whenever you have a scene in which your antagonist is not actively in opposition to the protagonist. And Hannibal actually does this a lot. In fact, it does it to a more complex degree than just showing them in their downtime doing whatever it is they do. What Hannibal does is it creates moments that feel like antagonist at rest, but later events in the show reveal that they absolutely were not, which keeps you guessing about this character. When you think you might have understood them, you just don't, which is a fascinating way to keep your attention on the villain. If a show is doing this, then you're constantly wondering, am I seeing who this character is, or am I not? And that's fascinating and interesting and keeps your attention. That is a compelling character that is the star of a show. In Batman the Dark Knight, the memed one, the Joker baby Heath Ledger, we am live in society, you know the drill. Well, in that movie, Heath Ledger's Joker burns a pile of money, and we're like, oh man, look how cool this guy is. He slams a dude's head into a pencil and is like, look, it disappeared. And he's like, oh yeah. This guy is the real villain. He's scary and menacing and creepy. He's not likable per se, and he's not relatable. He's not. Please stop. Please stop. You're not the Joker. Please, he's not relatable. And even so, we want him on screen. We're fascinated by that character as like a byproduct. Our focus of the movie is no longer becomes, I want to see Batman succeed. I want to see Batman do some ass kicking. Instead, it's like, what's the Joker gonna do? How's this gonna go? What sorts of things are gonna reveal this character? I doubt anyone would say they wanted to see a boat full of people die. So we're not rooting for the Joker, but we did want to see what is this character going to do in X situation. The audience shifts the story arc to be about how the Joker affects the story instead of about how our protagonist is going to change. That means there's no story arc for the protagonist, and instead they're static, as opposed to our villain who's doing all of the momentum in the story. This is a compelling villain. So, essentially, when you boil it down, it's about framing your villain as the momentum, as the one pushing the story forward. Normally, a story is going to have your protagonist pushing the story forward, doing all the major events and the climaxes and stuff. But these stories use the villain to do all of the momentum. Hannibal and the Joker in these stories alike are presented as forces of nature. Their motivations are completely unknown and foreign to us unless we dig really deep, and when we try to dig deep, we just get more questions. So, if you want your villains to be memorable, compelling, and the star of the show, then they need to be framed in this likable way, despite being evil. Hannibal's protagonist isn't a static character like Batman is in The Dark Knight. But the question we ask as an audience member when watching it isn't, will they catch him? Rather, it's more like, how will character X interact with Hannibal? We want to see Hannibal in scenes. So with that guy that's coded as the more bad guy than Hannibal, we wanted to see what Hannibal was going to do. And it turns out, Hannibal drugs him with scopolamine and has him cut off his own face and feed it to dogs.
What are you feeding my dogs?
Just me.
Every scene with one of these characters has us asking, who's in control here? So there's this scene, right, where our protagonist is like having his quote-unquote final battle with Hannibal. And the whole season, Will Graham is the main character. Hannibal and Will are together in Hannibal's house, but it's like essentially a battle of wits with their words to see who's going to reveal the truth about themselves in the situation. Hannibal ends up finding out that Will has been lying the whole time, and that actually legitimately hurts Hannibal's feelings, and you can tell, and it makes it such an incredibly compelling moment. It's to the point where you can see Hannibal starts to tear up because he feels betrayed. You almost feel bad for him because you kind of grown to like him. Yeah, he's been killing people, but you almost you think it's justified because, like, well, they were rude, so you can kill them and eat them. It's fine. So Hannibal reveals that this girl that Will really cares about, that he thought was dead, is in fact not dead, and then Hannibal kills her right in front of Will. It is this incredible moment that shows the unpredictable nature of Hannibal while still maintaining the consistency of what we know to be true about Hannibal. It is the epitome of this style of villain and how you write a good villain that you think about all the time, because I think about him all the time. If you make a villain likable in the way that you frame them, then it's gonna be the star of the show. Right? Right. Like, so villains, if you like them for some, like you kind of see how you would like to. Wait a second. Fuck. Okay. What about Homelander and Stormfront from The Boys? They're never framed in the way that you should root for them. You obviously are not going to like them. But they're really good villains. Ugh. This isn't a video, is it? This isn't a video essay. It doesn't work. I can't make a point. I just keep contradicting my own points. Okay, let's try this one more time. So maybe what it is that the villains need to be villains, but more than that. The villain, you go bad. They got to be bad, so you know they're villains. Sometimes it takes the form of being hateable. So, for example, The Boys. You definitely watch this show for the villains. Do not tell me otherwise. You can like the protagonist set of characters, but you're watching this show for the villains, and you do not like them. Like, you're watching the show for Homelander and kind of Stormfront because they're so shitty that you want to see them get fucked. By the way, the actor who plays Homelander has not been in, like, anything before this, and he's fucking incredible. Like, his acting performance, woo! So, there's the scene in The Boys where Homelander imagines cutting down an entire crowd with his laser vision who are protesting him. He can't handle the idea of the public not liking him, but in reality, when he fails to make them happy, he throws out his old catchphrase and then just zooms away, embarrassed, and then wallows in his self-pity, watching his mistakes over and over on the internet. At another point, Stormfront puts him off to do her own thing, and he gets upset when she doesn't blow off her responsibilities for him. He ends up burning down his trailer on a movie set out of frustration. Oh, by the way, Stormfront is a Nazi. I forgot to mention that elsewhere in this video. Like, literally, she's a Nazi, but... Also, Stormfront is the name of a neo-Nazi website. I mean, come on. So, if they're bad, but interesting, does that work? Cersei is relatable, and that makes her interesting, and she's bad. So ultimately, we see her as the bad one, and don't necessarily think she should win after we see her do bad stuff. So that fits this right? Hannibal is fascinating and captivating as an enigmatic character, so he's interesting, but we wouldn't really want to see someone who does what he does succeed in the real world. That makes sense, right? And the villains in The Boys, like them, are interesting. They're not just bad guys, but you hate them, but you want to see them on screen. You want to see them do stuff because they're interesting. They're complex. They have mixed motivations depending on which character in this mix of villains. They have godlike status and a strangely realistic representation of the way that kind of power could corrupt someone's brain until it's essentially damaged. Sometimes you love to hate them, and sometimes you're sad for them, but you still want to see them lose and get theirs in the end. Or, I mean, at least you really wouldn't want to see a real-world version of this person do what they do. So, when you're watching The Boys, you're, like, excited to see those characters on screen, but you're not excited when they do what they want to do. For example, Homelander is shitty, but, like, every time he's on screen, I'm just like, oh, damn, dude. And there's a lot of reasons that could be. For Homelander, he represents some of the shittiest parts of America, especially in Season 2. But also, he does some things that I hate. I hate that he does it. Like, for example, when he finds out that he has a kid that's still alive today, he goes to the house with their mother and just stays there. And it's so uncomfortable and so stressful, but the scenes are so magnetic. It's amazing. It's so good. So maybe that's how it works. You just need this sort of villain that sucks you in with different aspects of their interestingness. They need to be bad, and you need to know they're a bad guy so that these character traits and plot points stacked on top of that is what makes them interesting and makes them the star of the show. Also, Stormfront. Oh, dude, okay. Something really cool. I don't know how this fits in the video, but they kind of foreshadow Stormfront. By the way, if you didn't know, Stormfront's racist, guys, and other things. So they foreshadow her being this kind of racist by having her say shit early on that people nowadays in the real world say to couch their racism. It's fucking incredible. Like, early on, she's talking to Starlight, and she's like, yeah, you should be able to say whatever you want. Like, don't let what other people think hold you back. And, like, when you first hear that, you may not see anything wrong with that. And then she says some fucking racist shit in episode 6 in season 2. I think that's when she says it.
Yellow bastard.
And you're like, oh, that gets recategorized as her saying censorship and cancel culture bad. And it's just like... Anyway, that show's really good. Y'all should watch it. Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender is another great example of this kind of villain. She has heinous ideas about the world and desires to gain power and wield it more than anything. She isn't redeemable, but the reason she does what she does makes her understandable. Near the end of the show, Azula and her brother Zuko battle in the final Agni Kai. Prior to this, we see her slowly unravel, even as her dream of becoming the Fire Lord is realized. And in the fight against Zuko, she fails when she attempts to kill Katara with a lightning bolt that Zuko redirects. Then Katara lays a smackdown and incapacitates her by freezing her, then chaining her arms to a grate. This leads to a complete and total meltdown. You see, Azula has spent her entire life trying to impress and live up to her father's expectations. All she has ever known is violence and displays of power. Her own mother saw her as a monster. And that reflects in the way that she thinks of herself and the way that she treats others, even those meant to be her friends. So what I'm trying to say is that a compelling villain is one that you know is the bad guy, that you root against, but that has more complex characterization than just they're the bad guy. Whether that's the fact that they're relatable, or whether it's the fact that they're evil and you hate them, but it's for interesting reasons, or if it's just that they're fascinating, interesting, and enigmatic. Having some of those traits, while you know that they're bad and that you would fight against them, creates a fascinating villain that you're going to remember and is going to be the reason you watch the show. Except wait, what's this? Magneto? How'd you get in here? We don't hate Magneto. We don't dislike him, and depending on the storyline, sometimes he's the guy in the right. Like, we support him. Like, we don't even want him to fail. Oops. Looks like my declarative statement was wrong yet again. Here we go. Right. Villains that... Okay, so... If villains aren't... Okay, so... Magneto is a villain you like. He's a villain you sometimes relate to. He's a villain who's sometimes right. Fuck, this doesn't make any sense. Well, okay, let's think about Magneto. Maybe if we talk about Magneto for a little bit, we can find out why he doesn't fit into my other categories. He was a product of the Holocaust. So growing up, he was separated from his mom and went to separate Holocaust camps. So when Magneto gains his mutant powers, he intends on making the ones responsible for all of that pay for it. He's a force of nature, much like the other ones that I talked about, and he intends on equalizing the playing field and attempts to mutate the rest of the human race, no matter the side effects or cost. He would do anything to protect his kind, the mutants, like he was unable to do during World War II because he's Jewish. In doing this, he puts his trauma on the others around him. It's shown that he has the capacity to change and that he could be a good man, but he can't let go of that fear. His friend Charles Xavier shows him that he can persevere through compassion and the betterment of the community he has. Shaw offers him another option for closure, which is a show of power, and he's very conflicted between the two options presented to him. Another version of Magneto is in the Civil War House of M comics, where Charles Xavier and Magneto have to team up. Mutants are being rounded up in concentration camps because of the Mutant Registration Act. Magneto has been liberating mutants for years, and the biggest camp of them all is in a place called Genosha. Charles doesn't agree with Magneto's tactics, so Magneto tells him to read the mind of a recently freed mutant. Charles sees all the torture and suffering that's being inflicted on these mutants. Charles says, "We need to tell everyone. All of the nations need to know about this atrocity." And Magneto replies, "They already know. They're the ones funding Genosha." So they agree to take things into their own hands and liberate Genosha. The soldiers of Genosha wouldn't give up even as the liberation started, so Magneto had to use a trick up his sleeve. He knew something about the island of Genosha, that their main export was iron from under the ground. So Magneto lifted up a mountain-sized chunk of the earth with iron in it and held it over the camp, giving them an ultimatum. He said, "Either surrender and free all the mutants, or we all die. Because I'd rather die than allow mutants to live under your oppression any longer." So we see Magneto in so many different lights with so many different causes, and depending on which story you're reading or watching, he's not even wrong about the way the humans want to treat mutants. So how can we even say that all the time he's a bad guy? Yeah, sometimes his idea is to eliminate humans, or sometimes he wants to almost create an ethno-state and separate from all of the humans. But other times, he's just a guy looking out for the rights of mutants as they're being undermined by humans. How can I even fit him into any of these categories? Not only does he run the gamut of complications and options for what he can do, but when you think about his motivations, while you may not be able to relate to them, it's understandable, and you can see why someone would come to the conclusions he does. Maybe, sometimes, Magneto was right. So maybe the best villains are the ones you think might be right. But not Thanos. He wasn't right. He did not have a point. Shut up, please. Thanos in the MCU, he could have solved his problems without murder. There was a really simple solution when you have that glove. If you're going to snap, why can't you just double the resources? I'm sure other people have said this, but Thanos was dumb. Based on his experiences whenever he was younger, the planet he's from, and how it got destroyed.
Titan was like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around.
He believes that the only way is to prevent overpopulation. He believes this to be the solution because of the result of what he has seen so far. He is, of course, wrong, and the movies show him to be wrong. Obviously, wiping out half of all living things doesn't even really make sense. If you killed half of all plant life, along with half of all, other types of animal life, then the animals left will have just as much resources to feed on as the ones before did. None of that makes any sense. But that lapse in logic doesn't make him a bad character, it just makes him deeply flawed and wrong. If he wasn't, then why would we root for the heroes? If he was right, then he is the hero. And the movie doesn't do that. So he is a good character. Just everyone who thinks that he had a point is an idiot, and you're wrong, and oh my god, watch the movie again. Holy shit. Also, if you know about the Thanos from the comic, he just was really horny for death. So that's why he thought killing half of everyone would be a good idea. What can you do? Okay, so since I've disproved my own points multiple times, and I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, maybe there's another way that we can think about villains. Maybe it's not whether they're possibly good or possibly bad. Maybe it's not whether we could relate to them or agree with them, or whether they're an enigma and interesting and we want to just see what they do. Maybe it's about their motivation. Cersei's motivation is what makes her relatable. Hannibal's motivation is what makes him fascinating. The whole eat the rude and try and create people like him. Homelander's motivation is fascinating as well. It's disturbing and weird, but at some points it makes sense, and it's compelling to hear the story about why he is the way he is. And Magneto, his compelling motivation is part of what makes you think he might be right. So maybe all we need is a compelling motivation. For example, the Joker, again, but the other one in a different movie, his motivation comes from living a shitty life. We're talking 2016 Joker, sorry if that wasn't clear. He perceives a hypocrisy in the world. Actually, the Dark Knight Joker also is this way. So, the Dark Knight Joker perceives a hypocrisy in the world, saying that all the people who think they're good are one step away from being bad guys, and the Joker in 2016 Joker uses actually a similar format, but to tell a different story from a position that might even be more relatable. But it's the motivation as the story plot point. Oh, by the way, the 2016 Joker, he is a villain. I don't know what to tell y'all. And if your villain kind of shows that sort of characterization that they could have been anyone before, or that what made them what they are isn't some magical evil juice, it's the circumstances that created them. Even the grossest, evilest ones like Homelander and Stormfront are actually products of the circumstances they're in. That doesn't excuse them being shitty and evil, but it's fascinating to see that motivation come from somewhere that you can trace it back to. Maybe that's what ties all of these together. Okay, disregard everything I said before that. There is no secret sauce to your villains. That was actually the point. Sorry to have led you on so many times, but there really isn't just some list of traits that makes a villain compelling or that makes them the star of the show. But I wanted to kind of show you how you could use different versions of a character. I wanted to show you a bunch of examples of villains that are incredibly compelling and are the reason you're watching a show, that come from completely different writing styles and characterization. This same logic applies essentially to any character type, not just villains. I wanted to give these examples because they run the gamut of characterization. The characters are incredibly different from one of each other, and they still end up being the reason this piece of media is memorable. And I'm doing this, that way you know in the future that if someone tells you, here is the surefire way to write a good villain, you know they're full of shit. Because at least one of these examples that I've given you probably won't fit into their criteria. So I hope you enjoyed that little rant about some random villains. I honestly only made this because I wanted to talk about a bunch of awesome villains in shows where they're the point of the show, and maybe talk about why they're good. But I decided to pretend that I knew what I was talking about. Anyway, love it if you comment and talk to us about your favorite villains, not just in the cheesy way. Tell me why you think they're compelling. Do what I did here. Tell me what things make them the star of whatever you're interested in. Also, please ring the bell so that you can summon phantoms into your world. And check out our second channel. It's all of its stream highlights. They're really fun, edited, meme videos about our streams. By the way, we stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays-ish, generally. And we'll be doing D&D at some point. And the podcast files, essentially, will also be uploaded to our second channel if you want to listen to us play D&D in a homebrew world that I created by myself. Also, Dan, he's got a cool world too. It's inspired by Transformers, except for all the Transformers are dead and it's Earth. It's really cool. I don't know how to explain it. I'll probably do an intro for those videos. You can cut what I'm doing. Some of this is cut up. I'll probably do an intro for those videos explaining the world a little bit and the characterization and everything like that. So you guys get an idea. It's really fun. Anyway, I'll see y'all later. Heath's Ledgers.